we've talked about this before. What do you have to be like the face of the league? You have to obviously be one of the best players in the league or the best player, but you have to be marketable. And Ant's so marketable. Like he's just so funny, so easy to like. Like he's always on, you know, various interviews just making people laugh. Like Ant has that charisma and that it factor. I think that like John Morant has that, you know, we've been missing for the last year. So do you think though he has the ability to get multiple chips? Like does he have that type of factor, or can we not even talk about that what if scenario until he's gone? When he leaves Minnesota.
You heard my question, and it's my question for a reason, because with all due respect, he's not going to win multiple chips in Minnesota. He does have the personality and the game, the skill set, the athleticism, everything. He's got the package to be the face of the league. I don't think he does it in Minnesota. And that's, again, no knock to Minnesota. Like I said, I've never been. I'm going to see for myself. It's tough for me, you know, as much as, you know, Jay will say, you know, Giannis doesn't get enough push because, you know, he's from Europe or Greece via Nigeria. But I think it's also because he's in Milwaukee. And again, no disrespect to Milwaukee, but yeah, if you look at where the faces of our leagues have been typically, right? They're in the big cities. They're in Chicago. They're in LA. They're in New York, right? There's, you know, can you name, you know, Boston? You know, and Boston, although not a big sity, for basketball it is, right? It's a historical spot. So, you know, if you take out LA, Chicago, Boston, like where have the other faces of the leagues been?
San Antonio.
Was he a face of the league? Was Tim Duncan a face of the league?
Yeah, he was.
I mean, he's in my top 10, so I was like top 10. But debatable for sure. Miami,
it was difficult. It was difficult to market him. It was difficult to market him, not because he was in San Antonio, but because he was so quiet. That's why it was.
And is San Antonio a small market? I was the only one I could think of that's not like LA. Right. You know, like these massive.
He wasn't. He wasn't the face of the league. We still looked at Kobe and Shaq as the face of the league during those early 2000s.
I think that's valid.
And they were in and they were in LA.
He was one of the faces. They were more popular. But definitely Tim Duncan was one of the.
It would be like today. There's a lot of talent, but he's not. Yeah, I agree with you. He wasn't like a LeBron, a Jordan.
The only exception to those big markets of of Chicago, Boston, LA, basketball big markets is LeBron, right? In Cleveland and in Miami. That's but where did he end up? He ends up in LA. So it's
well, one of the things we have to.
It's just hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, Tone, that we have to recognize when you're talking about the faces of the league, Magic, Jordan, James, Bryant, Shaq, like one of the things that went with their games, one is confidence.
Yep.
Number two is aesthetics. Like Anthony Edwards is a good-looking dude. So the fact that we're putting him on television and we're marketing him. And what we're trying to get as the NBA, we're trying to get the casual eye. We're not trying to get Tony. We're not trying to get Haley. We already got Haley and Tony on the hook.
We're already watching.
Yeah, we're already on the hook. We're trying to get the casual eye. So how do we get the casual eye to recognize this guy? Well, the way we get the casual eye is we have to make it aesthetically good for people. So, okay, there's this guy that plays in Minnesota. He's this high wire act. He plays with this ridiculous amount of confidence. And he's good looking. Okay, that helps us out for the casual fan because now they want to see him. The problem that I have with Minnesota is the same problem that I had with James in Cleveland, the same problem that I had with Shaq in Orlando. I just think he's going to end up outgrowing Minnesota. I don't think that it's just because I don't think that Minnesota is a whack basketball city. I think Minnesota is a good basketball city. I just feel like he's going to ultimately outgrow Minnesota and just become a bigger deal than what Minnesota can handle. And I think he's ultimately going to end up in a bigger market. Not because Minnesota isn't a great basketball city. It's just because he's going to become a bigger deal than Minnesota.
Kevin Garnett was a much better player in Minnesota. But what do we remember Kevin Garnett? We remember him as a Celtic. Like you do, right? Because that's where he went and won and formed the big three and blah, blah, blah. But let's be honest, like he was a terror in Minnesota.
Played 12 years in Minnesota. People forget that. It wasn't like he played 2 or 3 years. He was there for 12 years up in Minnesota.
12 years in Minnesota, 1 year in Brooklyn, and we remember that stretch of what was it, 4 years in Boston, 5 years? Like
He played 6 years. Yeah,
we remember the 6
in
years in Boston. Meanwhile,
Right.
the 13, 14 years around it, we completely ignore.
Completely
But
forget
let's
that.
be honest. I'm taking Minnesota KG over maybe all but one power forward in the history of basketball. And and people don't even talk about that, which is just it's crazy. It's crazy.
And again, when you're talking about just outgrowing a city, I mean that you might be a victim of your own success where now I have to go. I can't stay here anymore. Not because I don't want to. A prime example, Tone, I'll give you is Carmelo Anthony. I think about Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony didn't want to leave Syracuse. He did not want to leave there. But the problem is they told him he's going to be a top 3 pick in the draft. You've outgrown Syracuse.
Yeah,
it's time to go. It's time to go. And I feel like with Anthony Edwards, they're doing a great job up there in terms of building that unit.
Absolutely.
I think they're doing a great job. And to be quite honest with you, Tone, I do think that they're going to compete for the NBA championship at some point. I think
they will. I think they will compete. I think this is the first time that I can honestly say Minnesota is going to compete for a title. I just don't think they win it. And I think the opposite happened to Giannis. I think if they don't win it in Minnesota, he's going to be forced to leave. And I think Giannis, on the other hand, almost is a victim of his own success because they won. He feels like he can't or doesn't want to leave because they proved that they could do it. Right. But I'm telling you, if Giannis doesn't win that year, I don't think he's still there. I think
I agree.
I think at that point we're in year 8. I don't think we see Giannis in Milwaukee that much longer.
He doesn't. I don't think he signs that extension. It's the following year or the year. I think it's the following year that he signs a big extension. I think he's out. I think he would have bounced. And so that's what my thing is with Ant is going to follow more the path of LeBron, where he's going to have to go somewhere else to win versus Jordan, who they did a good job. They built a team around him and they win.
I do think he can win in Minnesota, though, Tone. I don't think that's the issue. I do think that
times in Minnesota.
But see, that's the thing, though, and I don't even think I don't think it's about winning multiple times. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that he does win multiple times in Minnesota. How much bigger of a deal would he be after he won multiple times in Minnesota if he was in Los Angeles or if he was in Miami, right? Or if he was in New York? He'd be an even bigger deal, which goes back to my original point that he would have to leave off the strength that I've just outgrown Minnesota. Minnesota has just become too small of a place for me, which when you think about what's going on today, Tone, with multimedia and how big the NBA has become in terms of expansion and in terms of being able to see NBA all over the place, you would think that it wouldn't be an issue staying in Cleveland. It wouldn't be an issue staying in Minnesota. But the fact that I play in Minnesota, well, that also means that expansion is in Los Angeles too. That expansion is also in New York too. That expansion is in Miami. Tone, you've said this to me 1,000 times. Tone, what's the third biggest North American city?
Toronto.
Toronto is huge. So the fourth biggest city in North America. Toronto is huge. And if these guys actually and what happened with Kawhi Leonard? To go up there and win, that was a big deal. But the fact that if I go to Los Angeles, I'm going to be an even bigger deal. I think it was a mistake for him to leave Toronto. I still stand on that. But the fact that he left and went home, that $40 million that he left on the table, he was able to make that back in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Joy, wait,